Hello and welcome back to the Smartbuild implementation series. We're in part 17, freight. So with freight, it's very similar to labor. So if you've just completed the labor setup, this one's going to be a lot more of the same. A couple different ways that you can set up freight, and we'll be looking at packages again. So that's where the freight calculation would happen. So we'll want to set up a package line item that says freight. So before we do that, we'll be going and actually setting up the calculation item. So in settings, setup wizard, freight tab, if you're starting with our generic database, you'll see two items in here, just to give you an idea. So there's a $2 line item and there's one at $3.70. So some people set it up to where they have their standard freight, and then maybe depending on the project, they decide if they want to have an escort or maybe a wide load or something like that, where they can simply pick another item. Now this, you may set this also up like we did the labor, where you just have a $1 calculation, and then in the job, if you just want to do a custom amount, you could have that set on $1. So again, to add these, you simply click the plus sign, put in a SKU, whatever you want to use for freight in the description. You don't have to use these for right now. And then selling unit could be per mile or just each, either way, and then a cost of whatever you decide. And again, if you choose this to be taxable or not, check this on or off here, and whether you want to lock it if you mark it up. So a lot of times people set this up as non-taxable and then they lock the markup. So with these items here, if you look, these are set up as non-taxable and locked markup. So again, add some items here, figure out what you need, and we can come back to here if you after we get into packages and you figure out that you needed to add some more items. But next we'll go into packages and we can come back here if we need to. So again, very similar to labor, we'll set up a package for freight. And if you go into a job and just look at this, there's a lot of different things that you could use. Maybe it's just the salesperson's judgment of, oh yeah, this is a taller peak. Or I know this is going to be more than one load on a semi or whatever you have going on. Maybe it's going to be, oh, there's some special order doors. That's going to be on a separate load. I need to do that. So there's a lot of factors when it comes to freight, but one obvious factor would possibly be like the weight. So with freight, you can set up weight just like you can pricing in Smartbuild. So every item that you add, if you go ahead and add the weight of it, you do get a total weight in the job. And again, this database here is not really showing accurate weights, but you get an idea of what's possible. So if you're setting up weights like this with all your items, it gives you another way that you could set it up in Smartbuild. So we'll jump over into packages, go to settings, go down to packages, and we'll go in there and we'll take a look and we'll talk about, so the first item would be, let's set up a freight that's just a custom line item where it just asks the salesperson, what do they want to charge for freight? So if we want to set up a question, I'll clear this out and we'll start here. So to set up a question, click the question button here and type in the question that you want to present to the salesperson. So maybe it's just enter freight amount, have a default, maybe you put $200 by default. So you always get $200 and then they can adjust from there. So if you set something like this up, that would just use this $1 calculation and it would put $200 in there. And if you look at how that looks in a job, if I turn freight on and I use this custom, here's what you get. So it just asks an amount, you type in an amount, and that's what you get. So it's pretty easy to set it up that way. Now, if you want to automate it some more, you could do things like maybe a standard delivery or number of loads or whatever, or maybe it's a mileage. So with this, if we look at how this standard delivery is set up, we'll jump into here a little bit. So we have miles to job site, and this is just asking the salesperson, okay, if it's one trip there and back, how many miles is it total? And then it would take your standard delivery cost that you had set up. Maybe it's $1 a mile, $2, whatever that is. And it calculates here. So again, it's just setting up a question, and you can always test your formulas out before you go into here. So you can test, you can just type in miles to job site and I'll do 100 and I calculate, my answer is going to be 100. So it just tells you that your formula works. So you can always use this test button if you want to test that out. So you could have miles to job site, and then you could also do, if you want to make this a little more complex, you could ask the salesperson how many loads. So number of loads. And I'll just default this to 1, hit OK. So now we're getting more complex here. We could test this out. So if we say miles to the job site, it's 50 miles, and we're going to have 4 loads, we calculate that, tells us 200 miles. So it does the math for you. And 50 is pretty easy, but if it was something like 36 miles, you would have to think a little bit to get that. So it could make the salesperson's life easier to set these up more complex. And again, you don't have to use this here. You can automate it to where it's just automatically calculating your freight. And this standard delivery and escort, these here are just using a different calculator in the back end. So one's using the 370 amount and one's using the other. And if you look into a job, how that's set up. So if you have more than one package that's in the freight category, you simply click the drop down here and pick the one you want and then click the checkbox and then answer the question. So that's how those look in a job. But if you're still setting these up and you see these and you're like, well, how do I get these set up here? If I want to add a fourth option, I click add new, I select blank, and then I just type in a package name. So maybe this is freight by weight. And the group name, if you start typing freight, you'll see the groups pop up that you already have. So I type in freight by weight. Now this is going to be a bundle. You want to make it a bundle. And the reason you make it a bundle is so that when you turn it on, it does show up here in the bottom of your summary page, itemized out, so you can see kind of what that is. It'll also show up in the freight line item, but bundles show up down here so you can see what you've calculated. So with the freight, set it as a bundle. And the default setting may always be on. And if it's freight by weight and it's always on, then you would automatically have a freight cost built into the job if the salesperson forgets to turn that on or if you forget. So you would always have something. You can always adjust it if you wanted. And this is kind of a smart, safe way to set it up. So freight by weight, bundle. Now, what kind of calculation do we need to set up? So we'll start here. We add a catalog item. We go to the output category. We put it in freight. We pick our catalog category. We find it in freight. So basically, catalog category, this is where you find your item. And then we can find all the items that we have in here. So again, if I had a line item that was $1, I may use it. I'm just going to use this delivery for now. But the thing could be, we set this up as freight. Our multiplier is delivery. Maybe it's a $1 line item so that we can use this calculation. Now we can look in here and look at the calculations that you have available that have weight. So there's a total weight, there's total framing weight. And again, you could do different categories. I'm just going to do total weight here. So the total weight times, and what do you want to charge? So if we take the total weight, and if we say for every 30,000 pounds, we're going to have a delivery. So if we take the total weight and we divide it by 30,000 pounds, so if we divide it by 30,000, so we do this and we test this. So if we put the total weight in as, maybe it comes out to 36,000 for a load, and we calculate this, it tells us we're going to have 2 loads. So this is going to automatically round up to a full load. So if it doesn't fit on the first load, it charges the second load. So again, this is a very basic formula you could set up. Think about how you want this. And also you may want to type in a usage. So maybe this is just freight by mile. This does show up in the job on the usage line. So again, this is a really quick example. Take your total weight, divided by whatever you want per load. And again, you can make this a lot more complex, but this is just a quick example. Then if you go back into your job and you go to your freight here, every job that you would open up, you could have that defaulted on. So the freight's always there. And if you want to change it to a manual amount, you could, or override it or turn it off. So you can automatically have those defaulted on. By setting them to default on, if you're using the framing rules, start from scratch. So if you're using the start from scratch button here, it would be on every time that you start a new job if you have the bundle defaulted to on. If you're using starting models, if you get to the point where you have starting model set up, you would want to turn that package on in the starting model and save the starting model that way. So every time you pick that starting model, it would be turned on. So there's 2 different ways you can default packages on, whether it's starting models or just as a default on. So again, a really quick rundown of freight. It's very similar to labor. The crucial thing is if you want to automate it, you do have to set up your weights like I've done here. And that takes some time to initially do that. But again, it's probably worth it in the long run if you want to really have Smartbuild speed up your quoting process for you and not miss your freight. So again, really quick video. Hope this helps everyone, and we'll see you next time.